So, quarterbacking. It is a very hotly debated topic within the board game sphere. People feel very strongly about it, and there's kind of two different sides. One side believes that it is always a player problem. It is on the person doing the quarterbacking, and they are the problem. Another side believes that it can be a game design issue. I don't think it's limited to either one. I think it can be either of them, or both at the same time. And I think this is important to talk about because understanding why a person is quarterbacking can help you kind of navigate the already complicated social situation of, having a bunch of different people around a table trying to enjoy a game together. If somebody is quarterbacking, you need to know if it's because that person is being a jerk or if the game itself kind of leans into and encourages that type of behavior. Because the solution to the problem is going to differ based on what it is. It might be as simple as having a conversation with that person. It might be that you pick and choose the type of games you want to play with that person when they're around. Or in the case of somebody just being an obnoxious jerk, it might be removing them from the table. You don't want to hit the problem with the wrong solution. And limiting yourself to thinking it's always on the player or it's always on the game will lead you to do exactly that. Secondly, when it is a game design issue, I truly believe that is a flaw. And we need to be able to talk about flaws openly without having a tidal wave of responses come in that it is a player problem, not a game design problem. There's no point in complaining about it. Constructive criticism is healthy as long as it's constructive. And this is true even when the flaw in question doesn't necessarily need to be fixed. And I'll go into that later, but that sometimes in this specific case, that's true. First things first, we need to clear the air about what quarterbacking actually is, because I would imagine when most people hear the term, they're going to picture some bully at the table aggressively telling everybody what to do. And that's a type of quarterbacking, and it's by far the worst type, but it's not the only type. It might be as simple as a knowledgeable person or a skilled person or somebody who's just played the game more, making suggestions to the others, which in a co-op game, you're meant to work together. That's kind of expected. But the thing is a lot of co-op games are on the more simple or less complex side, not always, but a lot of them are simpler but challenging. And those two things kind of combined to cause an unintended side effect, I think, where you have a limited number of options in a simpler co-op game, but a very small margin of error. Think of how easy you can lose in Pandemic, or how easily you can starve in Robinson Crusoe. Quarterbacking could just be me looking at the situation and going, hey, if you collect wood this turn, we'll have enough for that project. Or, everybody else has done this and this and this. We kind of need you to get food so we don't all starve. Is my suggestion correct? Probably. Will they go with it? That depends. If they do, I just kind of played their turn for them, because there isn't a whole lot they get to do on their turn. Now, if I do that multiple times in a row, I'm just trying to help, but if they keep following what I'm saying, I'm playing for them. That is also quarterbacking, and it's innocent, it's not malicious, it just happens. But the person who is having their turn played for them is not having fun. Now, the only way to remedy this would be for the more experienced or knowledgeable player to withhold critical information from the team as to not step on another player's toes. And that really feels counterproductive to the concept of a co-op game where you're working together as a team. And that's a common problem in a lot of medium to lightweight co-op games, including Robinson Crusoe, Pandemic. There's a game I just reviewed by Smirk and Dagger called The Spill, which in this, it's very much like Pandemic. It's a crisis mitigation game. And oil is spilling out of this tower, and if too much oil gets in one row, it's going to cascade and overflow into another row, and you can lose like that, or it'll contaminate animals. And on a player's turn, they can only do a couple very simple things. They can move a ship to a sector, they can remove the oil, they can push back the oil, they can rescue an animal. Because of the type of game it is and the scope of the game, how lightweight it is, odds are there's going to be a very critical action any player is going to need to take on their turn to not lose the game. That action might not always be obvious to that specific player, but somebody else at the table is probably going to see it. If they suggest it, two things are could happen. The player might go with it, like I said, in which case they just had their turn played for them, or they might not. Now, that's unlikely in the case of when it is a less experienced player with a more experienced player, because they're going to trust the judgment of the more experienced player. Or they'll reject it for the pure purpose of not being quarterbacked, which is as counterproductive to working as a team as it would be for the quarterback to withhold the information in the first place. Now, if everybody at the table is the same skill level, that's almost never going to happen. You would have to hit the probability lotto on any given game to do that. But if it did, the game is going to follow a linear track. The obvious critical move is going to be obvious to every player at the table. There's not going to be any debate, and the game is going to kind of play itself, which can be perceived as a flaw with the game. It's hard for me to argue that it's not a flaw when the ideal way to play a game to not step on somebody's toes, a co-op game, is to not work with the team, is to withhold information that you have because you don't want to accidentally play somebody's turn. It's equally as, it seems like a flaw if somebody has to intentionally not listen to suggestions from their team so that they get to play their turn in the first place. Neither of those things seem great as far as game design goes. Like, it seems like that's a flaw, right? So when is it a player issue? It's a player issue when a player is overstepping their boundaries to quarterback someone else. And this is more obvious in a complex game. The more complex the game, the more of a natural barricade exists between the game and quarterbacking. It's the amount of effort a quarterback has to put in that outs themselves. For example, suggesting a course of action in Pandemic or the spill is effortless. It's just a couple sentences, spit it out, blah, and does the player follow it? Now, take a game like Spirit Island. To quarterback me in Spirit Island, you're going to have to put in a ton of effort. You're going to have to analyze the entire island. You're going to have to try and find a way to look at my hand or ask to see my hand so that you can look through my powers, look at the situation, look at how much energy I have, look at the rest of the team, figure out what powers are going to combo together, and then tell me what to do, string by string, action by action, in order to quarterback me. And as soon as you do that, it's very obvious to the table that you're the problem. That wasn't a game problem. You had to stretch. You had to put in serious effort to quarterback me. Can't blame the game for that. Because here's the reality of it. You can quarterback any game if you try hard enough. It's the trying hard that shows that it's a you problem or another person's problem. Because Spirit Island has some of the most table talk of any game I've ever played. The turns are simultaneous. Every turn, it's everybody's talking to each other, trying to figure out how to combo actions in that. And despite that fact, you'd think it would be very easy for somebody to be like, you do this, 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 this. But the nature of the game, its complexity, it's not just the complexity, it's the breadth of actions that are available, kind of stop that from happening. Terms in Spirit Island are vague. I'll say, would a +2 range help anybody with their powers? Or, I can't cover this land, it's going to blight. Can anybody else get it? Or, oh, you're going to use that power on that land and do 8 damage? Here, let me use my power first so that I can push more invaders into your land so that you can destroy them. It's a natural barricade, like I said. You could do it. You'd have to try really hard. Now, the difference is between the simple games and the complex games, again, is the variety of actions. See, the simpler the game, the more likely there's going to be one or two correct decisions. In a game like Spirit Island, there's always such a vast variety of possibilities that there usually isn't an obvious, if you do this specific thing, then we're going to be better off. Instead, there's like 10 things they can do that would make you better off, or possibly worse off, because it's a more unpredictable game. When it comes down to the simple games, if you don't have those options, if you don't have that breadth of choice, it's much easier to quarterback. Now, does that mean that all simple games are subject to it being a game problem? No. Another game by Smirk and Dagger is The Night Cage. This is a very, very simple game, and it has all of the issues that I've talked about. But there's also an optional rule in the rule book that stops it. There's a rule that makes it so that you can't talk to each other unless your characters are in adjacent spaces. You can't silence people for most games. That wouldn't work. But for this specific game, this specific theme, it works really well. And it stops the quarterbacking right there, because you can't quarterback if you can't talk. And when two people meet up, it's a flurry of back and forth. Like we need to go this way. We need to put this tile down. Da 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 da. It's less. You do this and this and this, and it's a very clever, very graceful solution. Sorry, that was my phone. To the problem. Simple games can block quarterbacking, but they have to be designed with some kind of mechanism or rule to do it, even if it's an optional one, like a Night Cage. One of the ways to look at this is, imagine you're playing Scrabble, but instead of having a row of letters in front of you, you have two letters, and then every other player has two letters, and you have to work together to make a word. What do you think is more likely to happen? Do you think that you're going to, as individuals, each put a letter down until you make a word? No. Odds are somebody is going to look at all the letters that each person has, come up with a word, suggest it, and then it's going to be put down. One player is going to essentially solve it. One of the ways I worry about if a game is going to have a quarterbacking design problem is, and again, there are exceptions because this applies to Night Cage as well, is if you can easily play a full table's worth of rules and characters alone. And the easily part is important because, again, you could play multiple spirits in Spirit Island. It is going to be a giant mental burden to do so. You can't do it easily. But I can easily play all the characters in Robinson Crusoe. I can easily play all the characters in Pandemic. Now, does this need fixed? Is it a flaw that needs fixed in games? The answer to that is not that simple. My personal answer would be yes. However, the real answer is maybe. See, co-op games, relatively speaking, are still fairly young. And I think a lot of co-op games being designed today are using outdated, archaic mechanisms, which is leading to this kind of solo game that isn't a solo game. It's a four-player game, but it's actually a solo game. But co-op games exist today because of the popularity of all the games that I feel have this problem. Pandemic, stuff like that. And the reason for that is there is another type of play style that if you fall into this play style, you've been watching this video shaking your head at me the entire time. And the thing is, this play style is no more invalid than my own. They're just as valid as I am. The way they play is not abnormal, it's normal for them. And that is people that play co-op games by committee. What this means is that a group of players will play a co-op game not as individuals contributing to a team, but as a whole, one cog in one machine. What that means is there isn't John playing the scientist and Jane playing the engineer. It is The red is the engineer, and the green is the scientist, and the scientist belongs to the committee, and the engineer belongs to the committee. And as a group, they kind of vote on what each of those characters are doing. They are not the characters. They are the voting committee on what actions are going to be taken. And the thing about that playstyle is it works. You can take a game like Pandemic or Robinson Crusoe and play it like a committee, and where nobody's playing an individual, and vote on what each of the characters do, and there's no flaw whatsoever. It works perfect. Thing is, you can't combine two different players with two different play styles like that. If you try to mix people that play like a committee and people that play as an individual contributing to a team together, somebody's not going to have fun. Now, I still think the flaw needs fixed. I still think it is a flaw. And the reason for that is you can adjust it. You can put in, gates to gatekeeping, gates to quarterbacking without impacting the play style of the committee. You could play any game as a committee, even Spirit Island. It would take more effort, but playing complex games as opposed to simple games takes more effort in general. That's just kind of standard. But you could do it. There's no game you couldn't just sit around and not be an individual on, but everybody puts this up to a vote on what's going to happen. You could do that. That is as close as you can get to four minds becoming one, because you're not. It's still four different voices, but you're playing like it. You're playing like a single entity rather than an individual contributing to a team. So I think you could design games, even simple co-op games, that have mechanisms in place to kind of barricade quarterbacking without impacting that play style, so that you should never try to make everybody happy, because then you'll make no one happy. But it's a thing that it's not going to make anybody unhappy by doing so. So I still think that is a flaw, and it could be fixed. Whether or not the majority is going to hold that opinion, I don't know. There's a lot of co-op games that are very popular that I have trouble enjoying unless I'm playing them by myself. I think they make for excellent solo games. Robinson Crusoe is an excellent solo game. The Spill is an excellent solo game. The Night Cage is an excellent solo game. So, there you have it. The answer, at least coming from me, is it's either or both, not one or the other. And hopefully I made it pretty clear why I believe that to be true, and the benefits of kind of being more open-minded about it and being able to talk about it openly. And if you enjoyed this video or found it informative or interesting, consider liking and subscribing. If you want to see more videos like this one, not necessarily just to see my face, but this opinion piece, and I have trouble with some words, analytical pieces, I guess, where I'm not just talking about a specific game, let me know, and maybe I'll make more of them. I've also left some links down in the description below. One of my website where you can find the bulk of my written content, and in this specific case, if you want to see a more graceful, or rather read a more graceful take on this topic, there's a written version of this video where I'm not blabbering on camera trying to get my words correct, so it's probably a little bit deeper and more comprehensive than what is on the video. You can check that out. I've also left links down to my Twitter if you want to follow me, my Discord, which is empty, but if you want, my Patreon, my Instagram, stuff like that. In any case, thanks for watching, and until next time.